Hi, and welcome to World Dance, Japan and Korea Unit, Lecture 2. In this lecture, we're actually going to be traveling to Japan. We're going to start by looking at No theater, then Kabuki, and finally Butoh. Japan is actually on the far eastern side of the area we commonly refer to as Asia. Its neighbors are Korea, China, and Russia. I'm going to play this little video for us to tell us a little bit more about No.
In this video, we will introduce one of the Japanese traditional performing arts, which is called No. Together with Kabuki, No is a unique, world-class Japanese form of drama whose most remarkable characteristic is that a protagonist performs wearing a mask, which is called a No mask. No has a 650-year tradition, and it has been named as an intangible cultural heritage by UNESCO. First of all, we'll briefly introduce the history of No. Then we'll introduce the performing stage, the roles of the characters, and the musical instruments. Although No is a traditional performing art of Japan, its original source came from China long ago in the 6th or 7th century and mixed with the traditional ancient arts of Japan. Then it mixed with other kinds of dance and songs over the years, finally evolving into today's No with its plots and matching dances. No's very existence had been in imminent danger in its long history, but thanks to the people who love No and the people who tried their best to preserve and transmit Japanese traditional performing arts to posterity, No could be inherited by each generation up to today. Here, let's listen to what a No actor, Jiichi Asami, has to say about the ways to enjoy No.
こんにちは。して方関税流能楽師の浅見事実と申します。よろしくお願いいたします。能の魅力というのは何と言ってもこの能舞台で背景がない、そして照明も一定のこの能舞台でいかに演者がその一曲の人物になりきって物語を表現していくか、それにかかっていると思います。お客様見る側もこの背景のない、照明も変わらない舞台上をご覧になって自分でいろんなことを想像しながら見る、そういう面白さがこの能にはあると思います。
A multitude of No tales have been made over the years, and today over 200 tales are being performed. No is divided into 5 groups depending upon the shite, which means protagonist. So let's see them one by one. The shite, protagonist of Wakinomono, is a god. The shite of Shudamono is a warrior who falls into Shudado, that is the Asura realm, an unhappy rebirth. The shite of Katsudamono is a woman. The tales which do not belong to the other 4 types are called Zono. Their subjects are various. The shite of Kirino is a creature other than a human being. The performance of No consists of the actors, musicians, chorus, and so on. Each performer has a different role to play. First, let's look at the characters and their different roles. The characters are Shite, Waki, Tsure, Wakitsure, and Aikyogen. Shite means the role of a protagonist. Tsure means a supporting actor because Shite leads Tsure. So it is also called shitetsure. Depending on the tales, a tsure can also play what is almost the same role as a shite. Sometimes tsure will not enter the stage at all, and sometimes tsure will enter the stage many times. Moreover, shitetsure will wear a no mask in many cases. Waki is an opposite role to shite. Shite play many roles of gods and ghosts, etc. In contrast, waki play flesh and blood characters. Wakitsure is a supporting actor of waki. Waki and wakitsure cannot wear no masks. Aikyogen plays a role for connecting the interlude between two scenes of no. It introduces the characters in a play and explains the situation. Next, let's look at the roles of performers who are not characters. There are koken, jiutai, and hayashi. Koken are people who are sitting at the back of the stage. They help characters dress, and they carry and hand over stage properties. Moreover, koken would have to stand in for shite if some accident happens to shite, so it's an important role. Jiutai is composed of 8 members. It's a chorus that chants the situation of a scene and of the character's inner life, etc. Hayashi have a role of playing musical instruments. In addition, other performers, except for the one who plays the flute, shout to create a particular mood for the performance. Hayashi is composed of 4 people who play the flute, kozutsumi, small hand drum, otsutsumi, big hand drum, and taiko, big drum. Sometimes no taiko is used. No is performed on a no stage. Today, the seats for the audience are set in a no theater inside a building, but the no stage was built outdoors in ancient times. The form of the no stage is very distinctive. It's roughly divided into 4 types. They are main stage, side stage, rear stage, and bridge passageway. The arrangement of the audience is also unique. It is commonly divided into the front, middle front, and side seating. The front is the place where the no performance can be viewed from the front, so it is the most expensive seat. Side seating is the place where the characters coming in from the side bridge passageway can be seen up close. While the middle front is the place from which the whole stage can be seen, the downstage right pillar obstructs the view of the characters on the main stage, so it's the very cheapest seat. Although each seating section is priced differently, each has its own different benefit. The best seats from which to enjoy no also vary with the highlights of the different no songs. Here, let's look at how the costumes are worn. Well,
I'm going to pause him there. I want to take us back and actually look at a couple of the things that he mentioned in a little bit more detail. So these last two are examples of no characters and no performance. The thing I want you to pay attention to here, or to remember from your reading, is that the person who is dressed as the character is really almost pantomiming the movement. So within no theater, you actually have pantomime or dancers in the front, and then the song or emotion being conveyed by the character is actually sung by the people sitting in the back or on the sides, depending upon the space. This image here is of a woman. So this is one of the female protagonist characters. We know that it is a shite or a protagonist because they are wearing a mask. We can also tell a number of things costume-wise about this female character. She is wealthy. She has gold embroidered in her costume, and even her fan has gold on it. So this is a wealthier, feminine character. This character is possibly an old man. This old man is also a shite, or the main character, but is not wealthy. The person is dressed in brown, the hair is unkempt, and we have a hat for working or being outside. So we know that this is a lower class character, possibly a god in disguise, as is often common in these performances. So there's nothing to give away the god status yet, but just wait. I want to come back to the characters themselves. So we saw in here an example of the female-led character. We also saw the god-led or old man character. You can then have a warrior, or you can have a non-human character. And finally, anything that doesn't necessarily fit into one of these categories is the fifth category of tale that can be told in no theater. A thing to really remember from our book is that originally these performances were for the everyday people. They were performed in villages to share these grand stories, almost like traveling storytellers in the medieval ages. They would travel and they would sing the story on the side while somebody acted out what was happening in the story. And because makeup might be hard to get, they would carve masks. This then became absorbed by the landowners. They saw these performances and said, oh, hey, I want you to come do that for me in my castle or at my estate. And gradually, No was pulled from the streets of Japan into the finer homes and became part of the samurai class culture. It basically is like opera in the Japan tradition. Another thing to note are the people on the stage space. So unlike a modern ballet performance, where you might have the two lead dancers dancing on a completely empty stage space, in No, you are going to have a number of people who are seated around the performance area. First of all, you see the instrumentalists. I know that my koken are highlighted right now, but I'm going here to my hayashi. So these four people sit at the back of the stage and play their instruments, as opposed to being in an orchestra pit. Except for the flautist, who is playing the instrument with his or her mouth, we actually have drummers who can yell or chant or add impact to what's going on stage. These folks on the side are the ones who are singing. So they are the ones who are singing the story or conveying the emotion of the character. So they might be saying, she is really sad, she's going to climb the mountain to sit and think for a while, and they will help to convey this. The highlighted people, the two people in blue in the back, are actually very important. They help the characters to dress. They actually do change clothes on stage. It's this idea of scene transformation. But if something should happen, they are also the understudies. So they have to know exactly where they are in the performance. And if something happened to our lead performer, then a koken would actually take on that costume, take on that persona, and step in. So even while they are back here, they are completely absorbed in the performance space, and they have already sort of taken themselves through that progression, which is the next thing I want to talk about. The No stage is actually very important to the No philosophy. I love how she writes about this in your book, so please take note if you are interested. When you are off stage, over here on the other side of the entrance curtain, you are in our world, the real world. But once you pass through the entrance curtain and process along the bridge passageway, you are basically entering the world of the spirits. For us, the world of the spirits, or the image of heaven, might have big puffy clouds. For the Japanese, it's pine trees. And so these pine trees, which are either living, growing pine trees along the bridge passageway or drawn on the back of the stage, these pine trees go from small to large. Pine trees are their big puffy clouds. So as you process down the bridge passageway, you are entering the world of the spirits. You are entering the world of these mythical stories. You are really sort of putting yourself into the situation, into the world in which the story takes place. The best seats are right down here in front. The second best seats are over here on the side, where you can really see the costuming of the performer as they're coming in, and you can also get a pretty good look at everybody as well as the singers. And the worst seats, or the last tier, are the middle front because there's a pillar that ends up blocking part of your view. However, as I mentioned before, part of the idea behind no is that you're actually supposed to be in this trance-like otherworldly state yourself. And so you can kind of decide, you know, how much do you want to pay for tickets if you're meant to fall asleep and sort of, you know, have that waking dream sort of feel for the performance.
Side stage, rear stage, and bridge passageway.
Now we're going to take a look at a no performer. So this is actually the same location where we were just seeing the video. This is the same school. And here I have a performer. I want you to try and guess for yourself who do you think the performer is and what their status may be. So this character, a couple of things to take note of when you're trying to determine. This character has a sword, and this character also has a lot of gold on their costume. The next one is a female character. And this is where it becomes very interesting to pay attention to the hands and the feet because they're not utilized a lot. Both male and female characters have fans. Fans were actually a very necessary part of life for a very long time. Air conditioning did not exist. And so men and women would have fans and they would utilize them in a number of different ways, both for cooling yourself as well as for conveying or communicating to somebody else. You might clap it together if you were annoyed. You might kind of bat your eyes behind it if you're flirting. In this case, this female character is actually going to use the fan to demonstrate a tea dance or a tea ceremony. No, like Kabuki, is currently experiencing a bit of a change. It was exclusively male for a very, very long time. And now No is allowing some females to be a part of the performance. Most often, currently, they are instrumentalists, but some females are beginning to present and dance or perform as the actual No Shite. Kabuki, on the other hand, begins with a female and today is still almost exclusively male. Again, it is beginning to open up. You can now find more females performing Kabuki, but for a very long time, and this little clip here talks about why, it was exclusively men performing Kabuki.
Many elements of traditional Japanese culture, such as cuisine and martial arts, are well known throughout the world. Kabuki, a form of classical theater performance, may not be as well understood in the West, but has evolved over 400 years to still maintain influence and popularity to this day. The word kabuki is derived from the Japanese verb kabuku, meaning out of the ordinary or bizarre. Its history began in early 17th century Kyoto, where a shrine maiden named Izumo no Okuni would use the city's dry Kamo riverbed as a stage to perform unusual dances for passerby, who found her daring parodies of Buddhist prayers both entertaining and mesmerizing. Soon other troupes began performing in the same style, and Kabuki made history as Japan's first dramatic performance form catering to the common people. By relying on makeup, or kesho, and facial expressions instead of masks, and focusing on historical events and everyday life rather than folk tales, Kabuki set itself apart from the upper-class dance theater form known as no, and provided a unique commentary on society during the Edo period. At first, the dance was practiced only by females, and commonly referred to as onakabuki. It soon evolved to an ensemble performance, and became a regular attraction at tea houses, drawing audiences from all social classes. At this point, onakabuki was often risque, as geishas performed not only to show off their singing and dancing abilities, but also to advertise their bodies to potential clients. A ban by the conservative Tokugawa shogunate in 1629 led to the emergence of wakashu kabuki, with young boys as actors. But when this was also banned, for similar reasons, there was a transition to yaro kabuki, performed by men, necessitating elaborate costumes and makeup for those playing female roles, or onagata. Attempts by the government to control kabuki didn't end with bans on the gender or age of performers. The Tokugawa military group, or bakufu, was fueled by Confucian ideals and often enacted sanctions on costume fabrics, stage weaponry, and the subject matter of the plot. At the same time, kabuki became closely associated with and influenced by bunraku, an elaborate form of puppet theater. Due to these influences, the once spontaneous one-act dance evolved into a structured five-act play, often based on the tenets of Confucian philosophy. Before 1868, when the Tokugawa shogunate fell and Emperor Meiji was restored to power, Japan had practiced isolation from other countries, or sakoku, and thus the development of kabuki had mostly been shaped by domestic influences. But even before this period, European artists, such as Claude Monet, had become interested in and inspired by Japanese art, such as woodblock prints, as well as live performance. After 1868, others, such as Vincent van Gogh and composer Claude Debussy, began to incorporate kabuki influences in their work, while kabuki itself underwent much change and experimentation to adapt to the new modern era. Like other traditional art forms, kabuki suffered in popularity in the wake of World War II, but innovation by artists such as director Tetsuji Takechi led to a resurgence shortly after. Indeed, kabuki was even considered a popular form of entertainment amongst American troops stationed in Japan, despite initial U.S. censorship of Japanese traditions. Today, kabuki still lives on as an integral part of Japan's rich cultural heritage, extending its influence beyond the stage to television, film, and anime. The art form pioneered by Okuni continues to delight audiences with the actors' elaborate makeup, extravagant and delicately embroidered costumes, and the unmistakable melodrama of the stories told on stage.
So Kabuki began with a female performing, and then because of the worry about prostitution, it transitioned to being exclusively male and older males. But Kabuki is more kind of the everyday theater. It's not the big fancy opera that No is. And so makeup was actually much less expensive. And so makeup was an easier thing to get a hold of. So makeup is utilized in Kabuki and masks are utilized in No. Kabuki is going to tell more stories kind of like Shakespeare would tell stories. Things like Romeo and Juliet, but also Much Ado About Nothing, comedies and tragedies. Whereas No is more going to tell you stories about warriors and women who are your ideal or the hero that you want to be. Kabuki is going to have more love stories and sacrifices that we kind of associate more with stage plays today, or possibly even movies. So that's kind of the sense of Kabuki. This is a death scene, and you'll see that actually the changes, the costume changes still happen where the audience can see them. So you'll actually see her go from wearing her dress prior to the scene to then being in white, which for them is of death. So she moves from being a part of the real world into being a part of the spirit world as we watch the dance. Two people back there to help with the costume change, and ta-da. You'll notice that we don't really see the character's hands very much. Again, this is a female character being portrayed by a man, and so the hands might give it away. The other thing to note is that we have both snow and cherry blossom leaves or buds falling. This is supposed to give us that idea of transition, but it's also supposed to give us a beautiful, serene scene. So these are both cherry blossoms as well as snow that are falling. And again, the vocalizations happen off stage, so my performer doesn't actually vocalize. Also, I'm going to have a lot more of those various characters where I might only have one as my shite, who is a goblin or some sort of non-human character. In Kabuki, I'm going to have a lot of different characters that are not exactly human, or at least have more fun costumes. I have things like warriors and snakes and soldiers, and so these are a lot of fun for the Kabuki audiences.
Our next act.
another example that I want to show you, these are actually females performing female roles. So this is probably akin to what the original Kabuki performances may have been like. Basically a group of females doing a little one-act dance. It might have a little bit of a story in it. In here we have characters who seem like they're sort of preparing for their day, examining their faces, that kind of thing. But again, you'll notice that we don't really see their hands very often, even though they are, in this case, females portraying females. This is still sort of a less common thing to see, as it is still associated with the geisha culture. We again have a singer off stage who is conveying the emotions, and we have the performers on stage moving in response to the music and the emotions. The last one that we're going to look at from Japan is Butoh. Butoh is a more contemporary expressionist dance performance that is a reaction to the horrors of World War II in Japan. So Japan actually experienced 2 atomic bombs being dropped upon it from the United States. And so we actually have 2 founders of what ultimately becomes called Butoh, who had slightly different styles on this expressionistic movement. Hijikata is going to give us the more grotesque expression of Butoh, and Ono is going to give us the universe is much larger than I am expression of Butoh. So in both cases, you will see a body that is usually sort of grayish in tone. For Hijikata, this is symbolic of the ashes of the dead covering those of the living so that you look like a walking corpse. In Ono, this is significant of the idea that we are all from clay and we will all return to clay or return to the earth. And so it's sort of symbolic of us moving through life, but life is so much larger than we are.
こういう舞踏体に雷が落ちます。これが体の中を通って指先から床に放電していきます。それに引っ張られて歩く。これが抜け殻の状態になっていきます。ここから舞踏は始まります。
There There's a lot of history about Butoh, a lot of ideas about its origins, a lot of interpretations of it. The thing that we really want to hang on to there are two different types. There's this more grotesque ash type, and then there's the more universal.
And surrealism. Butoh was throwing off the constraints of both Western dance and traditional Japanese dance. Hijikata soon abandoned these sources in search of something purely Japanese. Butoh went away from the traditional idea of beauty and found beauty in an organic, natural body, like a child splashing around in a puddle. Hijikata's childhood experiences in northern Japan, surrounded by grown-ups who worked long hours in rice fields, which contorted their bodies, influenced his idea of a beautiful body. Ono's version of Butoh is very different from Hijikata's. Ono's was described as ethereal and floating, ever reaching the light. Ono was influenced by Marcel McHugh and a flamenco dancer named La Argentina. Ono became famous in Europe in 1977 after performing tribute to La Argentina. Hijikata began to direct Ono, and he created two more pieces.
So both of them worked together, but ultimately they kind of developed their own styles. So this is contemporary Butoh in kind of the Hijikata style. The sound is dissonant on purpose. Remember, this is the body covered in the ashes of the dead, corpse-like interpretation. Often this type of performance is done in the nude. Hijikata. And Ono's version is usually done with some form of costuming. Again, the Ono version is this concept of it doesn't matter anyway, the universe is so much larger than we are. And again, the body sort of in the gray color, again with no hair, is that of our bodies just being clay, and they will return to clay. So it is still sort of the pessimism, if you will, of Butoh, but with sort of the greater purpose image of beauty. Butoh can be performed by men and women. Contemporarily, Butoh is actually being performed for a various number of reasons still today. So there are Butoh pieces expressing concern about climate change. There are Butoh pieces expressing concern about poverty. There are Butoh pieces expressing concern about the health and well-being of children. So the Butoh is still being used today as a very expressive, but also very quiet, to a certain extent, beauty. So in review, historically, we had dynastic kings and ruling classes of Japan. Our current government structure is that of a presidency. Major religions in Japan are Buddhism, but also arguably Confucianism. Again, Confucianism is not necessarily a religion, it's more of a philosophical approach. Influences for our purposes, we have the samurai culture, which absorbs and becomes centered around the No theater. We have the feudal system, which is what leads us to absorb the No theater from the people into the upper classes. Also, it's the feudal system that dictates the morals of the society and says no women can perform because it was being seen in brothels. And then, of course, World War II is a huge influence on the creation of Butoh. Accompaniments for all three forms. We have drums to some extent in all of our forms, in Kabuki and in No for sure. as well as wind and string instruments. Again, we see those for sure in Kabuki and in No. When you get into Butoh, you can kind of go back and forth. Hijikata uses a lot more drums, a lot more dissonance. Ono, or the Ono style, utilizes more wind and string instruments, as we just saw in the previous example. Themes, we have folk tales, particularly in No, for the court and for the people. Remember, it originally started for the people and then the court absorbed it. We have this love of drama that we see both in No as well as Kabuki and also in Butoh. We have this pull between life and death. A lot of our stories, No and Butoh in particular, have sort of this appreciation of life and death both. We have a number of dances that are done by spirits or ghosts in the No theater. And then of course we have the sort of corpse-like dancing or ghostish dancing feel in Butoh. For all three styles, to a certain extent, we were male only. Butoh is the one that quickly shifts to including females as well, but it was originally only males who were initially participating. Minimalist movement, we can see this in all three of them. We don't have big grand jetés or big leaps across the stage. We have more cautious steps. We can move quickly, but we're not going to do big, large kicks and gestures unless that's very specific. And then we will do a big action that's really meant to take focus. And all of these are a part of various national festivals and events. Join me next time for our next lecture.